Chapter 7. Dink, Josh, Ruth Rose, and their teacher walked back to the classroom. "Now we have another mystery to solve," Mrs. Eagle told the class. "Josh, why don't you and Dink and Ruth Rose tell the class what you've been up to?" The three kids told their classmates about the first footprint and showed them Josh's drawing. Then they explained how they had traced and measured each teacher's shoe to try to find the one who had left the footprint. Josh's drawing, Ruth Rose's list, and the 8 shoe outlines were on Mrs. Eagle's desk. Also on the desk were the drawing of the skeleton and the key that Josh had found in his locker. "One more thing," Mrs. Eagle said. "Someone sprinkled powder on the floor near Josh's locker, then made another footprint." She looked at the class. "Any ideas?" Bobby raised his hand. "I think the same person who took the skeleton put the key in Josh's locker," he said. "But why?" asked Ruth Rose. "We don't know what the key goes to." Mrs. Eagle took the key and walked over to the classroom door. She slipped the key into the keyhole and tried to lock the door. "It doesn't work in this one," she said. Then she tried the key in her desk lock. "Nor this one." "We could try all the locks in the school," Frankie suggested. Mrs. Eagle nodded. "Good idea, Frankie, but there are dozens of doors and desks." "Could the key go to a suitcase or a safety deposit box?" Dink asked. Mrs. Eagle smiled at Dink. "Good thinking." "Maybe it's the key to someone's house," Tommy said. "These are all good ideas," Mrs. Eagle said, "but it's not practical to go around Greenlawn trying the key in every keyhole." "What I can't figure out is why he's doing this," Dink said. "Why leave footprints in a key that he knew we'd find?" Josh raised his hand. "And why did the guy pick my locker to leave it in?" he asked. "Maybe he didn't," Ruth Rose said. "The lockers don't have our names on them. The guy might have just picked any 3rd grade locker." "You're right," Mrs. Eagle said. "Maybe the key was meant to be found by anyone in this room." Everyone looked at each other and started whispering. Mrs. Eagle made a pile of all the evidence on her desk and handed it to Josh along with the key. "But now we have to get back to work," she said. It was windier and colder as Dink, Josh, and Ruth Rose walked home after school. "Let's go to my house," Ruth Rose said. "I'll make hot chocolate." "With whipped cream?" Josh asked. "Marshmallows," Ruth Rose said. "The big fat ones?" "No, Josh, the little bitty ones," Ruth Rose answered. "I like the big ones," Josh mumbled. A few minutes later, Ruth Rose let them in with her key. She found a note from her mom saying she'd taken Ruth Rose's little brother, Nate, to the dentist. In the kitchen, Ruth Rose's cat, Tiger, was lying on the table in a patch of sun. Ruth Rose shooed Tiger away, then made hot chocolate in the microwave. Dink and Josh sat at the table. Josh laid the key and the drawing of the skeleton on the sunny spot vacated by Tiger. "I think we're missing something," Dink said, looking down at the key and the drawing. "The guy steals a skeleton and leaves a footprint. Then he plants a key in your locker and leaves another shoe print and powder that he sprinkled on the floor. He's trying to tell us something. But what?" Ruth Rose brought 3 mugs and a bag of marshmallows to the table. They all floated marshmallows on their hot chocolate. "I just remembered something," she said. "Didn't Mrs. Waters tell us she was missing her powder?" "But she didn't make the footprint outside my locker," Josh said. "I know," Ruth Rose said, "but someone could have stolen her powder to use it to make that footprint. Maybe the thief wants everyone to suspect Mrs. Waters of taking the skeleton." The kids sipped their hot chocolate and thought about that. "It would have to be someone who can get into her desk to get the powder," Dink said finally. "Like Mr. Dillon," Ruth Rose said. "Yeah, but the footprints aren't his either," Josh said. "Remember, he was wearing those loafers with no tread on the bottom?" "And why would Mr. Dillon steal something and blame it on his secretary?" Dink asked. "It doesn't make sense." "I wonder if anything else has been stolen from the school that we don't know about," Ruth Rose said. "Well, if anybody would know, it's Mrs. Waters," Dink said. "We could talk to her again tomorrow." Josh picked up the skeleton picture that he had wrapped around the key. "What do you guys think about this 2 on the school means?" he asked. "The school doesn't have 2 skeletons, does it?" "The high school and the middle school might have their own," Ruth Rose said. Did anyone steal their skeletons? I doubt it, or we would have heard something, Dink said. I don't want to live in a town where some zombie goes around stealing skeletons, Josh grumbled. Anyway, this key must mean something, Dink said. He placed the key next to the skull's mouth. Talk to us, Mr. Bones. Wait a minute, Ruth Rose cried. She moved the key up a few inches next to the big 2. What does that say? Josh dropped a marshmallow into his mug. It says key head, he said. Key face? Key bones? Ruth Rose shook her head. She pointed at the key. Key, she said. Then she pointed at the number of the skull. 2, she continued. Then she pointed to the skeleton's body. Skeleton, she said. I think it says key to skeleton,